Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and I gotta say this before I get too far into this video. Where the hell did that come from? Bum, 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 bum. Marvel Monday! Bum, 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 bum. Okay, so I'll be honest, I'm not somebody who was hating on this show before it came out. I think that the animation style didn't look incredible, but I will say that I, for the most part, was like, yeah, it's going to be just a regular Spider-Man, comic TV show. It's not going to be incredible, but it's going to be, entertaining. And my thought process is like, this is going to be for a new generation of kids who are growing up and wanting to see some kind of Spider-Man Saturday cartoon. And then it was absolutely peak. What the hell? This show was really, really good. I want to dive into it. I want to talk about everything that I really enjoyed about this. And I think that I want to start off with the first couple of episodes and kind of my general reaction from the first couple of episodes, which is this movie is doing what a lot of Spider-Man content should do, which is this takes place in New York. There's a lot of heroes and a lot of characters that take place in New York. Have them all show up as much as possible if you can without it feeling overstuffed with a lot of things. And I think that they do an incredible job with that. I think that for the most part, we're getting stuff like a Doctor Strange cameo that doesn't feel out of place. He shows up in the first episode and you're like, wow, Doctor Strange is in this universe. He's messing around with, these weird demons and he's fighting a venom-like creature. This is really interesting. And I like the fact that we're getting characters like Nico Minoru, who's a runaway, who's not necessarily a part of any Spider-Man content like ever. And it's just a lot of really big name comic book characters that are showing up in the show. And it's really interesting how they're deciding to kind of like mess around with the origin stories of some a little bit. Some of them are not who you would expect them to be. Some of them are starting off, as a younger character than they would typically be. Like in the comics, I think Tombstone is always significantly older than Peter, but having him be somebody who's just a couple years older than him is really interesting. The fact that he's going to the same school as him is really cool. And I like the fact that we're diving into a lot of really interesting characters that aren't just particularly Spider-Man. Like I mentioned, Nico Minoru is in this. I love what they're doing with Norman Osborn. I like the fact that they're introducing the Sokovia Accords and having this be in a adjacent universe to the MCU, but still having it feel very similar to some of those MCU ties. I'm enjoying the fact that we're getting Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross and a lot more of like the government side of things in this movie. I think that this show so far has been absolutely incredible. Also, I want to apologize. I keep calling it movie show. I typically talk about movies on this channel, so every time I talk about a show, I have a tendency to say movie instead of show. That's my bad. But overall, I'm loving everything that they're doing with this movie and this show. Sorry. And I think that one of my favorite things about it is the fact that they're taking characters that aren't typically the people you'd expect to see in Spider-Man media, and it's making it harder to understand where they're going with this show, which is what I really like about it. We have Nico Minoru, who's not a typical Spider-Man character. We have Lonnie Lincoln as a football player, where you can kind of have a general idea of where he's potentially going to go in this show, and you're getting like love interest like Pearl in this show, and it's like, what is happening? It's hard to tell where they're going with the show, and I think that that's what makes it incredibly interesting to me. As somebody who's seen Spectacular Spider-Man, and I've seen the Ultimate Spider-Man animated show, and I've seen the old one from the 90s, it's like, there's only so much you can do with Spider-Man, and you have a general idea of what the main story beats are going to be, what characters are going to have like these twists where they become villains, and in this show, they're doing an interesting job of making it where it's like, Tombstone might not even become a villain. Like, as of right now, the 110th Street Gang or whatever that he's a part of isn't even necessarily like bad guys. Like, they're almost like a group of vigilantes in a sense, because they're just protecting their neighborhood. Like, for the most part, they did a really good job of like kind of villainizing the Scorpion Gang, because they actually had, a supervillain being one of the main people in it. But so far with the 110th Street Gang, we're not really seeing them doing a lot of organized crime. There's the one sequence towards the end of the season, I think it's the last episode, where they randomly decide to go attack police officers. But other than that, they literally are just defending the street that they live on. And I think that there's something kind of noble about that. I think that they're going to do an interesting meta commentary on, gang violence. Is it wrong if you're defending your turf? I don't know. I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff that can be said about that. Whereas it's like vigilantes versus gangs, and like, oh, well, the gangs might just be getting a bad rap because they're people of color. Is that something that this show is going to dive into? I'm incredibly intrigued about it. I think that this show is doing a lot of very interesting stuff. I think that Lonnie Lincoln is going to be an incredible character to come. And I think a lot of people keep saying like, oh my God, I'm not ready for his twist when he becomes a villain. But I'm like, at the same time, is he going to become a villain? Because as of right now, obviously they turned his name into Tombstone, and that doesn't necessarily sound like a good superhero name. But also, we have people like Daredevil. Devil doesn't sound like a good name. Tombstone could potentially be a superhero in this universe. And I think a lot of people aren't looking at that possibility. And there's a lot of moments like that where it's like very similarly there's a lot of characters in the show where it's like they are typically villains but could end up being good people in this universe, which I think is something that's really interesting. Something that Spider-Man comics and media in general tends to do a really good job with is making it so that his characters, the villains he's facing, are people that he actually has personal stakes with. I think that one of the best examples of this is Spider-Man 2 with Dr. Otto Octavius. And like, I like the fact that they, you know, have Peter get connected to these characters before they become villains, but also this universe is incredibly different because he got his spider bite because of like a time loop incident. He got his spider bite because of like time travel and people like Doctor Strange messing with forces that they really shouldn't be messing with. And it could completely lead to an insanely different universe where a lot of these people you typically expect to be like Spider-Man villains are actually going to try to be good people. Like Tombstone could potentially try to be a vigilante now. And I think that that would be interesting. And I think that it'd be really cool if him and Spider-Man potentially like team up. And that would be really interesting because so far, Lonnie Lincoln actually did one of the most noble things in this show, which is Spider-Man's getting ready to kill Scorpion. And then Tombstone steps in front of him and is like, no, we don't need to kill him. We need to be a better person. And he's kind of telling him, you need to be more influential. And I think that that's important and that's great. And that's a really big part of his character. So it's like, unless they pull some, oh, well, this thing that's giving him his powers is, you know, chipping away at his brain and he's kind of losing control. He could be a good guy. There's a universe out here now where Tombstone becomes a relatively good guy. And like, unless like the gang starts making him do really bad things because they're like, well, we made you and we're the reason why you're, you know, this superhero person now or whatever. And they start controlling him and making him do bad things. I haven't seen a reason why he would do that yet. Like overall, this gang, obviously not the best group of people, but they also, except for the one time they were like, let's randomly attack these cops, haven't been doing a bunch of really bad things. And also, now that Tombstone is kind of like bulletproof and has his tough skin that he has in the comics, why would he just randomly out of nowhere, you know, I feel like if the gang starts telling him, hey, do this thing, and he's something he doesn't want to do, he's going to actually put his foot down now because he has a reason to. He saved all of their lives. I don't know. I just think that the Lonnie Lincoln character is so incredibly interesting. And with everything that they've done with him so far, it seems like he could potentially go and be a good person, which I'm intrigued to see. I'm really excited to see what happens with that. And then another thing, Norman Osborn kind of having his like evil twist at the end of the show. Very interesting. I think that they are going to reveal he was intentionally trying to get something from outer space because like why would he make a portal to just the empty vacuums of outer space? He's an absolute genius. I think that the portal technology obviously is important, but there's got to be something in particular that he's looking for out there. And I wouldn't be surprised if it goes into like he was looking for some Venom symbiote and he ended up finding one but not the one that he was looking for, and he's going to continue going out and looking for like just different materials out in outer space that he probably shouldn't be messing with. And I think that that's going to be an interesting concept. I'm kind of excited to see what they do with cosmic side of the Spider-Man show, because Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is doing a great job of introducing the neighborhood side of Spider-Man, but I also think like it could be interesting to show like one of the villains is messing around with outer space. Why is he doing that? How is he doing that? I think that that's really interesting. I think that another thing they could do potentially to kind of separate this more from the MCU is in the next season introduce Reed Richards or some kind of Fantastic Four like parallels for this Mr. Osborn, because Mr. Osborn going out and trying to figure out stuff with like space doesn't necessarily match with his character incredibly well. I think that it's something that would probably be a little bit better if they built up to that, but as of right now they haven't really done anything. They were just like, okay, now he has a portal to outer space, and it's like, okay, well that was a very random reveal to just throw in the end of this episode, but I liked it. I think that it was interesting. I like the fact that Harry and Peter are now having their own company where they're going to be, you know, getting a bunch of really young geniuses to get together and kind of fund their projects and their works. I think that that's going to be a really cool concept. For anybody who hasn't seen it, that chalkboard has a lot of very interesting names. Ned Leeds is on there. There's one of the Spider-Women, I can't remember her name right now, but like that entire chalkboard had like a lot of different characters that are like actual people that exist in the comics. It's really exciting because it's like, are we going to be seeing characters like Ned Leeds in the future of the show? That could be really exciting. A lot of people have been showing some like concept art for Gwen Stacy, and supposedly Ghost Spider is going to be in the next season. I don't know how true of a statement that is, but I will say if that does happen, I think it could be entertaining. I think that she's a genius and she's a really good character to include in a show like this. I will say this, personally, I'm mad that for some reason in Spider Media, we tend to only get Miles Morales, Spider-Gwen, and Peter. I think that they're obviously incredible and they're the big three for a reason, but also they set up the fact that the spider that bite Peter in this show did not die. Like, it ended up going away. Somebody was walking away and it was on their backpack. If they don't introduce Silk in this show, I'm going to scream. I'm actually going to scream. I think that this show would benefit so much from Silk. I think that Silk would be an incredible character to introduce into this show. And I think that it'd be a fun character to kind of like give Peter a sidekick. And I think also just kind of like interest, like they could be a love interest in a way. Obviously, don't do some of the batshit crazy things that they do with Silk in the comics, but I do think that like it would be very interesting to have another Spider person around that isn't just like the same people from Spider-Verse. I love Peter Parker to death. I think that he's a great character, and I do think that it would be weird to live in a world where we're getting a bunch of Spider-Man content that isn't Peter Parker. But however, this is like the 7th animated show we've gotten where Peter Parker Spider-Man is the main Spider-Man, and it would be kind of cool if we get to see them flesh out other Spider characters just as much. So if they're going to introduce other Spider characters, I want Silk. Please, for the love of God, give us Silk. It'd be really cool. I think that this show also is so like out there enough that like they could potentially do a Ben Reilly storyline and it would work relatively well. Like, they got Peter's DNA and use it to make a bunch of spiders. Why wouldn't they get his DNA and use it to literally make another person? A clone of Peter Parker would make sense in this universe. I think it would work relatively well. But yeah, that being said, that's pretty much all the main things I wanted to talk about in this video. I think that it's incredibly exciting. The Watcher showing up was a fun little cameo. And I just like the fact that we're getting to see all these different random characters who wouldn't necessarily interact in the MCU because they don't have time to introduce all of these characters in the MCU. It's fun. I'm really, really enjoying it. But yeah, that being said, that was it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching. And if you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe. And I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Pow, pow, pow.